Hello, Silver Soul. Thanks for the video. This is a reply to you, and to a degree, thou art that. It's really just to you, but I think the points relate to what thou art that said. Um, First of all, you said that my broad definition of physics creates a physical hegemony where everything is physics. That's true. It does, and this is related to the importance of the word metaphysics, since there's people who feel that there are things separate from physics, and I don't believe that this is me being too invested in a category or the reality of categories. I believe categories are entirely arbitrary cognitive, you know, cognitive artifacts, concepts. And of course, more than one category can apply to any one thing. We can talk about in a while the idea that everything is philosophy, just like everything is physics. But it's a different perspective, and the point being that while you are focusing on things that are not defined physically right now, such as, say, a philosophy of love, it's my belief that they can be, and that in fact, in the philosophy of love, we have some science, some bioevolution. This distinction between internal and external is exactly what I hope to eliminate, because that is brought in by this framing of calling some things metaphysical. And when you talk about language being non-physical, the words coming out of your mouth, interpreting it as language as opposed to just sound, I don't see any of those as not physically explicable eventually, and that we even have the beginning of such explanations. The brain is a physical thing, right? So its ability to understand a particular language is going to be traced to physical properties of that brain. You mentioned some higher level things, just like our culture, and even those things are physical, right? Our physical environment. So when you say physics measures external quantities, no, that's just the point of a thorough materialism. It explains now what's going on in the brain as well, okay? No, we don't have the full explanation. I'm not talking about having all the answers. I'm talking about the fact that whatever the explanation is, it will be possible to tell it in terms of the physical interactions going on in the brain. That is what I believe. That's what makes me a materialist. And when I say that this is semantics, talking about the fact that you want to call a paradigm, a set of axioms that are used in a particular field, metaphysics, and I say that that is semantic, I'm not saying it's not a good conversation to have. I love semantic arguments. It's just a matter of it being important to determine when things are semantic, disagreements are semantic, because that's the difference between whether the concepts are opposed and different, or whether we're merely naming them different words. Now, if you merely want to call the axioms of a given field of knowledge metaphysics, you know, in and of itself, I wouldn't mind. That's just the sound. Metaphysics, metaphysics, metaphysics. It's just a bunch of sounds. It could be attached to that concept if you like. But I believe the fact of the matter is that there's a lot more framing to metaphysics than that, and it implies these false distinctions, for example, between the physical and the unphysical, between this false distinction between internal to the mind, external to the mind, and false ideas about physical reality. For example, that physical reality doesn't have to do with the arrangement of the parts, as if the arrangement is not a part of a physical description of a system. You know, if I say there's 1,000 objects and they're blue and black, and all the blue ones are over here and all the black ones are over here in the one corner, uh, that arrangement is a part of the physical description. So, you know, when we start talking about things like relationships as having some non-physical uh, characteristics, I don't buy that. So how the word is used is important. I do believe in going from that. I'm not always insisting that the etymology be maintained. For example, the phrase uh, begging the question. That has come to mean, requires us to ask the following question, though it originally meant what? Circular reasoning. Okay, fine. But to know whether you want to go with the etymology or not requires several factors. One is, what do you mean by current when you say current use? What interval of time? The last second? The last year? The last week? The months? In a certain sense, all of those scopes are important. The meaning of a word, how it's used in a particular sentence, is its meaning in that sentence. On the other hand, if you want to understand what a word means socially, for example, let's say it's a political term, obviously you'd need a much bigger set and a broader scope of time. With a term like metaphysics, we have a scope of time that this has been discussed and debated and been controversial for thousands of years in philosophy. The word has been translated into many languages with the same technical meaning. So in a sense, the word concept transcends particular languages. And it is always meant to have something non-physical. And you, and also thou art that, though you agree, evidently, certainly thou art that these metaphysical things can be judged with relation to our experience, somehow you don't want to accept that means they're being judged physically, when that's where the definition of physical comes from as well, from our stream of perceptions. And in some sense, all of our perceptions are caused physically. They are all not as direct as they may appear to be. We may see a red object, think there's a red object out there, and really, no, it's some sort of hallucination. But the hallucination is still due to physical occurrences in my brain, and therefore it is still going to be physical. And as we sort this stuff out, we find, okay, so everything has a physical origin, everything is material, but it's still quite important, what it is, right? What is its characteristics as a physical thing? Is a unicorn, is it really an animal out there traipsing around in the forest, or is it really just an image I see due to some biochemical process in my brain? Now, as I said, we could discuss the idea that everything is philosophy. This is also true, just like everything being physics. Indeed, perhaps it's more true given that I view physics as an outgrowth of natural philosophy. How does nature work? Okay, so you could say that it's a subset. However, I'm a materialist. This means that from our notion of physical reality, from the natural philosophy that has to do with material reality, I have come upon, as so many of us have, a theory of materialism, saying that everything is material, that our brain is material, that it's philosophizing as a material thing. And thus, the theory is that everything is material. Now, it doesn't mean that I use physics to think through everything. Physics doesn't even try to answer many important questions, like about love, about human relationships, and so on and so forth. But I believe that physics could do those things. Now, we will probably not call it physics when it happens. We'll call it neurology and psychology and so on. But those fields will reduce down to physical explanations. And we might forever have these other terminology that doesn't sound as physical as physics itself does. It doesn't reduce everything into distances and masses, because we're discussing a higher level of phenomena, and we're going to want terms that make that in a single word correspond to something that's statistically complex, right? Millions of distances, millions of mass, some mass, the averages and totals. Mostly the reason I reject metaphysics, even though it's offered as this kind of a synonym for just axiomatic ideas that can be overthrown, is because it reinforces this framing that there's this dualism between the external and the internal.